All right. Hi, my name is Jaden, and I'm giving a little presentation today on food deserts and transportation security in the state of Washington. Um, so let's get into a little bit of background here. So food security, it depends not only on like the income of people in a region, uh, but also their access, right? So not only do they have to afford the food, they have to be able to get to the place that sells the food. So food deserts, this is a term used by the USDA and other um, sources on this. Food desert is an area that has both low income and low physical access to grocery stores. So often this is dependent in part on vehicle ownership. That's definitely a major factor there, right? Because most people drive to the grocery store when they're getting groceries, but not necessarily. Um, in Washington, the reason I chose this not only because obviously, I live here, but it also is an interesting state to focus on here. Geographically diverse, has significant regional disparities, right? So in and around the Sound, very urban, and also out in Spokane, Yakima, other areas. But most of the state in between is these very rural regions. So that contrast makes this quite an interesting topic in this area. So for this project, I was looking at how distance from households to the grocery store and the household's ownership of a vehicle can sort of confound and create these so-called food deserts with hampered accessibility of groceries, right? So we're highlighting regions in the state where there are populations that might have the monetary ability to buy food, but are just simply unable to reach the grocery store due to this inaccessibility. So for this project, I looked at data from the USDA's Food Access Research Atlas to map distance from a supermarket, sort of on average, right? So this first map is looking at the percentage of households in each census tract that are at least a mile from the nearest grocery store. So the darkest reds are going to be the areas where almost all, I can't quite read my legend. I have a kind of a zoomed out view here, but I think it was 87% and higher is this darkest red. And then the yellow is going to be where almost everybody is within a mile of a grocery store. And so we do kind of see exactly what we expect here, right? So in those urban areas, people are close to the grocery store. In the rural areas, they're farther from a grocery store. That makes a lot of sense. That is exactly what one would expect looking at this. Getting to our second map, this is data from the IPUMS looking at the share of households that don't have a vehicle. So again, our darkest red is the highest share of households that don't have a vehicle, kind of in this area and out to the side. And again, I can't quite read my numbers, but darkest red is the highest proportion without a vehicle. And once again, this is what we expect. In urban areas, people are less likely to own vehicles. But the most interesting part of this analysis is when we compare the two. I do have this note here. I use 2010 census tracts only because of the accessibility of the USDA data. They didn't have, at least that I could find, the 2020 census data. So this is 2010 census tracts. Anyway, most interesting thing happens when we overlay these statistics. This is a bivariate map mapping both on white to blue. That's going to be proportion of households without a vehicle, and the white to pink is far from a grocery store. So our dark purple is going to be potentially the most problematic census tracts, right, where people both are far from a grocery store and don't have a car. And so we see a few. There's this. I have a zoomed in view of the South Sound over here. So we see this large census tract. I believe that's kind of southeast of Olympia. And then also some other ones. This one's West Seattle, I think. This one's over near like Kenton, Auburn. And there's a few more just kind of around the state. So these, what I see looking at this, it's a lot of these that are kind of outside of the major urban centers, right? So not in our strictly urban regions, because there are plenty of grocery stores, and not in the most rural regions where pretty much everyone has a car, but in kind of those interesting in-between zones. And then there are some that are just in straight up urban areas, right? Like I think this is West Seattle, which was a little bit interesting to see. Okay, so that's what we have in terms of data, but the other part of this project was looking at kind of applications of this data, what I've found, and how it could be used. So really we are just providing data to policymakers, and what could they do with that? So it could be used to inform some sort of investment in transit, making like transit accessible, sort of grocery corridors, so to speak, so that people can take the bus or the train, however they do it, to get to the grocery store. This could be subsidies or other encouragement in food delivery and kind of mobile markets, so to speak, particularly in these potentially underserved, potentially problematic regions. Or it could inform zoning decisions, so maybe a requirement of transit or of grocery stores in certain areas that are zoned for certain things. So like requiring transit in food retail zoning approvals or something like that. Those solutions are definitely more urban focused, right? That wouldn't work very well, out in, central Washington where there pretty much isn't transit. So in those regions, potentially looking at support of food banks, particularly mobile food banks or grocery co-ops or partnerships with rideshare providers, that could help people get that food, even if they, don't have a car, can't take transit to get to a major grocery store. Maybe they can walk to their local co-op, or the mobile food bank comes in every now and again, however that might appear. That could also be partnerships or grants. I think USDA offers grants that could help fund like community-led stores, something of that in those rural regions. But all in all, really, it is just helping policymakers to prioritize funding and informing their zoning decisions in these most vulnerable regions. Outside of that, I think that this data could also be kind of overlaid with like transit data. I'd be curious to see in these regions that we have identified as potentially underserved, does transit kind of fill that gap, particularly in the slightly more urban tracts we've identified. So looking at a sort of overlay with like bus ridership data to particular stops, seeing are people actually taking the bus to the grocery stores when they don't have a car, or are people using rideshare services, or are people using like food delivery. Finding statistics on that, which I didn't have the opportunity to do in this project, but I think that would be quite interesting. That's about all I have. So before we go, just a couple thank yous down here at the bottom. For one, the UW CSDE provided the computation resources and the software for this project, so thank you to them. And honestly, a bigger thank you to them. I had some issues using ArcGIS for this project, had some things deleted a couple times, and they were quite helpful with working that out and making sure I could still get this project out. And a second thank you to my professor, Dr. Chu, for instruction and oversight, as this project would not have been possible without that. So big thank you. And that's all I have today.